Welcome to the Sidecar Sync podcast, your home for all things innovation, artificial intelligence, and associations. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Sidecar Sync, your home for content at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the world of associations. You are in for a treat today. This is the 100th episode of the Sidecar Sync. My name is Amith Nagarajan.
And my name is Mallory Mejias.
And we are your hosts for the 100th time. Mallory, how do you feel about that?
I'm feeling really excited, Amith. I've been looking forward to this episode probably since episode 1. 100 seemed so far away at that time, but now it's here. I feel like we've had an incredible 2-year run. I was looking back at our old Teams messages. I'm very sentimental. I mean, you might know this. I always like looking back and having mementos. So I went back and found the message. It was July 21st of 2023. You reached out to me. You said, hey, I have this idea, thinking about doing a podcast for Sidecar, and I want to co-host it with you. And I remember being, part excited, part terrified because I'd never done anything like that. And I can't believe that we are in September of 2025, 100 episodes later. How are you feeling about it?
I am stoked. It's just so cool. And I've never done a podcast before this one. I've been interviewed on a bunch of them in the past, but never had been a podcast host. So that's been a really fun journey. And it's been exciting to hear so many people reach out and say, I learned this on the pod. It's really helpful to me. I shared it with my friend. I shared it with a colleague. It's been super, super rewarding. So I love it. It's fantastic. It's a great way to stay engaged with our community. I think we're delivering some really interesting insights to folks. I think the interview series that you primarily do has been really well received when we bring in experts with different backgrounds to supplement our usual conversations. So it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun hosting it with you.
Well, thank you, Amith. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the Sidecar Sync podcast. I was going to ask you, I figured you had been on many podcasts before, but what was the trigger for you from just being a guest on podcasts to thinking, I want to launch one?
It wasn't, I think for me, it was not the experience of being a guest. I've always enjoyed doing that. But for me, it was more about the moment in time that we were at. I guess you said that was July of 23. And at that moment in time, we had been out there talking about AI already for about 6 or 7 years, pretty actively in the association market. I have an interest personally in AI that spans back almost two decades. But I started getting active with AI from a software development perspective and really getting deep into the guts of AI right around 10 years ago. So around 2015, really a little bit in 2014. So, and we got into really driving the message forward with the association community in the late 2010s. And for a lot of years, it kind of felt like we were these weirdos kind of, shouting from the rooftops and no one was listening. And people were like, wow, what are you talking about killer robots for? You're really weird, And I'm like, I am really weird, but I'm not wrong. This is going to be important for you guys. You should really pay attention to this. And if you get involved sooner, it's going to be cool. So fast forward through COVID and the pandemic and all the craziness that was. Then, along comes the ChatGPT moment in late 2022. And in early 2023, we had this experience where we decided to run a webinar. And this webinar was the first time we entitled something generative AI. We had done tons of AI education prior to that. But in April of 2023, we ran a webinar and we promoted it along with our friends at ASAE. And we ended up with 1,700 people attend that webinar, which is like an order of magnitude bigger than, typical webinars. I mean, these days we routinely run intro to AI webinars that have many, many hundreds of people, 400, 500, 600 people each time attend those regularly, which is really cool. But back then, we had never had a webinar that had that many people, and they were really engaged. I mean, people who attended this thing were asking tons of questions. We ran out of time. We had follow-ups. And then we had tons of demand right out of that for doing these AI boot camps, which were these synchronous instructor-led, I think they were 4 or 5 week long boot camps and really intensive ways of getting people up to speed on AI. And we were oversubscribed. We couldn't keep up with the demand for that. So all throughout 2023, we kept scaling that up, trying to figure out how to provide AI education. And really, in going back to the pod, in July of 2023, it just occurred to me that there was demand for a conversation at this intersection, as we always say, of all things associations and AI, where we could really try to make AI make sense for the association community. It's not about the technology, it's how you apply it to better advance your mission, to serve your team, to do all the great things that you do as an association, but to do them better, to do them faster, to do them at a different scale than you've been able to. So, my idea coming back to you in July 2023 was, hey, this could be a really cool medium. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. And so, I think you and I maybe started chatting about it that summer and that fall, and took us a minute to figure out exactly what we wanted to do, but then we launched it later that year, right?
Yeah, we launched it. I think the first episode, I have it somewhere, was October 23rd of 2023. So from July to October, we worked on it. We kind of honed in on the idea. I built up the courage to co-host a podcast, and then the Sidecar Sync was born. Since then, we've had tens of thousands of downloads, and I've got to say thank you to everyone who's listening, who's watching on YouTube. We would not have this podcast without you, without your feedback, your insights, your stories. So I've just got to say, as excited as we are to be here, we're so appreciative that you choose to join us every week as well. So what are we going to talk about in today's episode, Amith? That's going to be a fun one. I've cooked up a really fun episode today. We are going to look back at the previous 99 episodes. I was in a bit of a predicament. I had all of the audio files of all 99 episodes locked up in SharePoint, and this is on me, I have transcripts, but they're kind of in disparate places. They're on the Sidecar website, and it would not have been the most efficient thing for me to go and copy every transcript from the website into Claude, for example. So Amith had the idea, well, why don't you just run a program to do it for you? I said, okay, Amith. He said, well, use AI, and then we'll talk about it on the podcast. So that's what I did. I went to Claude. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. So I asked Claude, how would one write a program and run it? So it was a little bit meta. And then Claude kind of instructed me, well, here's all these options you have. Here are these platforms you could use. I thought about using Hugging Face, but it seemed a bit complicated. So I used Collab on Google. Collab notebooks. I don't know if you ever, I mean, it's duh, easy stuff. And Claude wrote the code for me and then really instructed me, here's where you put it. Here's what you do. I got an error message. Okay, here's how we fix that. I ran it. It did take kind of a long time to transcribe 99 episodes, but all in all, it took just 30 minutes of setup and then a few hours of waiting, and I had all of them. So with those 99 episode transcripts, I dropped them into Claude and did a lot of brainstorming and reflection over the past 99 episodes. So what we're going to be looking at is the journey to 100 episodes. We're going to be talking about the top 10 insights that come up over and over on this podcast. If you've been listening since episode 1, I would be willing to bet you can probably guess all of those 10 insights. We will be reflecting amongst me and Amith, lessons learned, things that we are looking forward to in the next 100 episodes, and then wrapping up. So let's first start with the journey. So we launched right before digitalNow in 2023, when AI was still pretty theoretical for associations. Claude calls this our foundation setting phase. This was episodes 1 through 20, so October 2023 through February 2024. In episode 2 and 1, we talked about AI agents, but it was still quite agents are coming. It wasn't like agents are here in this moment. In episode 10, we had our first AI predictions for 2024. We talked about multimodal models, which sounds like kid stuff now. We talked about the rising of open source, which again, we talk about even still 2 years later. And our fundamentals episodes became one of our most downloaded episodes ever. Phase 2, we'll call this the tipping point. This is episodes 21 through 40. In spring of 2024, we started to see associations go from watching to doing. We had episodes on healthcare AI, a really popular technical vectors episode, unstructured data deep dives. We also had some interview episodes that showed real implementations happening, and AI seemed to become a little bit less scary and a little bit more practical. Phase 3, episodes 41 through 60, we're calling this the acceleration. This was the time period leading up to digitalNow 2024 in DC, which I don't know about you, Amith, but felt kind of like a completely different energy from 2023. We went from
100%.
talking about what AI could do to what will it do today? Do you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah. DC was a moment in time, the DC conference, and we kind of are flip-flopping between DC and Chicago to bring the conference to both of these major association hubs. So we're in Chicago in a couple months. And in any event, DC last year really did feel like another inflection point and moment of acceleration in terms of the actual tangible use cases that people were talking about compared to the year before in Colorado, where it was really more of really curious, which is great.
Mhm, mhm.
But in DC, people were showcasing what they had built, and that was cool.
Yep. We had that association showcase on the Wednesday of the event. We also had some breakout sessions from association leaders that were showing us work they're actually doing with AI. Also, a note, we had talked about the Sidecar AI Mastermind group, and we started having participants in that group present their own projects from their association. So that was really kind of an inflection point, as you said. Phase 4, that was episodes 61 through 80, so we're getting more recent. We had our 2025 predictions episode, and we got a little bit bolder. We said we thought small models would be beating large ones and kind of changing the economics, which I think is held true. We've also talked about how voice AI and AI avatars would become production ready. Definitely true. And we saw associations asking about governance, not just tools. So, where are we now? This is what we're going to call the new normal, episodes 81 through 99, or I guess 100 now. We've been talking about artificial general intelligence, or AGI, neuromorphic computing, physical AI, and robotics entering association conversations, really shifting from how can AI help to AI readiness is the survival of your association. And I really like this. And I don't think we planned it this way. We didn't. But how episode 99 with Jackson Boyer, it was almost a full circle moment. Like we've spent the past nearly 100 episodes talking about technology with, of course, humanity sprinkled in there. But I thought the episode with Jackson, if you haven't all listened to it, was really great, talking about the importance of influence and human connection in the age of AI. And now we're at episode 100. So, Amith, what do you think about the 5 phases of the Sidecar Sync we've seen thus far?
I think Claude is really good at distilling information and categorizing it and coming up
Yep.
with really cool, catchy like phrases and titles and things for stuff. So that's pretty amazing by itself. That in that 99 prior episodes, or in that time frame, I should say, in just under a couple of years, we've gone from a lot of theories to a lot of action.
Mm.
And
Uh-huh.
I think that's true across the board. Even like think about how you prepared for this episode, what you described, which I'm not familiar with Google Colab, by the way. I've heard of it,
Oh,
but I have never used it. So you'll
I'll
have to
show you
tell
one
us
day.
more about that.
Don't
Yeah,
worry.
you have to tell us more about that. But the fact that you could go in there and build a program that you could run on your own and do the kind of digestion of unstructured data, manipulate it in a whole bunch of different ways, and come up with all the stuff you just described is pretty remarkable for a 2-year span of time. Because that would not have been even close to possible 2 years ago. That would have
Hey,
been a total pipe dream 2 years ago. That's pretty remarkable by itself.
yep. I've been thinking the same thing too, because we've talked about on the pod recently, but we are working on the 3rd edition of Ascend. And even just how much better Claude is. We've used AI to assist us in writing the books from the beginning, but I mean, the quality of the writing that you can get out of these tools now versus 2 years ago is just honestly insane. And I'm, as a side
Mhm.
note, very excited for everyone to see Ascend 3rd edition. It is going to be the best one yet by far, but we've come a long way.
Yeah, we sure have. And, I think that when we think about the theory of constraints, that would be kind of bounding in what people's productivity is or organizational output would be. That's what's changing so rapidly, right? When you think about constraints, you think about labor, you think about capital, you think about, in the case of some businesses, land, the ability to produce physical goods, things like that. That last category is uncommon for this sector, but the point would typically be around labor and capital are the constraints that would prevent people historically from doing a wide variety of things. Technological capability, of course, is another constraint. Even if someone had the idea and plenty of labor and plenty of capital, if the constraint was that the science simply hadn't yet been invented to do certain things, that'd be a problem. And we're entering this remarkable and kind of weird new era where the new normal is very weird, where we have no idea what not to expect, which
Mhm.
means we have no idea what to expect. And so that's exciting, but it also means that we have to be more nimble and we have to be more willing to accept that we were wrong about what we thought even yesterday, but certainly a year or two ago in terms of what's possible, what's not possible. One of the first things I tell association CEOs when I'm having a little bit deeper conversation about AI is just make sure you reevaluate your assumptions regularly. So if people say, well, I tried that with ChatGPT and it didn't work. And so I haven't gone back. And I'm like, well, when did you try that? They're like, oh, maybe right after it came out. Like, well, that is like comparing, you say, hey, I used a computer back in the 1960s with punch cards. And so
It was
mobile
awesome.
phones, it was just fantastic. It was a great experience back then. Um, but, in reality, we've gone through such a generational shift in such a short period of time with the tech. So, I guess my point would be that it's hard for even those of us that are spending all of our time thinking about this stuff. It's hard to keep up. Not so much in just like the stats and the data and all the different model releases and all that, but the mindset you have to have, and you have to kind of retrain your brain constantly that just because you think something isn't possible doesn't mean that that's true anymore, right? It may not have been true to begin with, but it's very likely untrue. Only moments after you form the opinion, which is really strange, and I find it ultimately very exciting because there are no upper bounds.
It is exciting. It is strange. It also, we've said this on the pod before, kind of breaks your brain a bit because I've known for a while now that I could create software using AI, right? But doing it is a whole different thing. And so now that I know that I can actually do it, you're right, there's no upward limit. It's kind of like, well, Mallory, what are you going to create? Because you
Right.
can't use the excuse that you're not technical. So what's next for you? And it's very scary, but as you said, very exciting too.
But doesn't it give you like an empowering kind of a feeling, right? To
Oh,
be able to
sure.
create things in your own, and maybe even create stuff that not only is for your own personal use, but use that other people could benefit from.
Right. And it's just something I've never thought about. You know, we all look ahead 5, 10 years, what we think our lives would look like. Well, mine has never included creating software that could benefit me or others. I just knew probably not in my wheelhouse. So now that's changed. So now it's okay. I've got to
Yep.
kind of reevaluate what I knew about myself, what I knew about my future. So I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to that. But
Well, I
AI
think
changing things.
the association community at large can relate to that because for the longest time, associations have considered technology and software development to be their Achilles heel. They say, well, no, we don't want to get into that because that's going to require a custom app, and I don't have to have the technical means to maintain that or spend the money. And now the barriers are coming down, the costs are decreasing, the maintainability is increasing, and you should reevaluate those thoughts, right? And I'm not suggesting that everything should be custom software. There are actually some folks in the AI world who are so incredibly focused on what you just described that they're saying that the world of the SaaS is going to go away, that the likes of Salesforce and HubSpot will cease to exist over the next coming decades because it's so easy for Mallory and anyone else to say, hey, I want a CRM, I want a marketing automation, I want this, I want that. I personally don't agree with that. And of course, I'm biased because for 30 years, I've been building SaaS products and preceding that, enterprise software products. But the reason I think that my point of view is really based on simple economics, which is it is true that software is going to become more abundant. It is true that more and more users are going to be able to create their own software. But I think it's also true that the competitive forces will drive quality improvements and price reductions in a variety of broader horizontal software tools like generic CRM and so forth. I'm hopeful that it'll help specialty markets like the association vertical as well. But I think what will happen is that even though you could create a generic CRM marketing automation, you'll probably still choose to use something out of the box because you know it just works. You don't have to think about
Mm,
it. And so the overall cost to you isn't just the cost of the software, but it's the knowledge that that software just works and plugs into everything and does a certain number of things quite well. My perfect example for this would be financial software. Even though I
mm,
could today, and even with Claude version 10 or whatever, create great financial software, I have zero interest in doing that. I'd much rather pay QuickBooks or even a NetSuite or something like that, whatever the fee is, in order to eliminate that conversation because I know that that type of software is just going to work really well with a battle tested piece of software. So I think it's going to be a mix, but I do think what's really exciting too is it's the glue that connects systems that oftentimes has been limiting. One of the tools that I think has made a remarkable impact with business users is this tool called Zapier. I think you've used Zapier a fair bit over the last
oh
few
yeah,
years, right?
yeah. I've dabbled for sure.
And that's an amazing tool even pre-AI because it allowed you to connect thousands of applications with each other, and in a fairly straightforward way, users can click and drag and drop and connect one technology to another, and when something happens over in HubSpot, to automatically move that data to another system. And it wasn't for enterprise caliber integrations typically, but it could empower business users to solve the last mile problem, which is that last bit of functionality they always wanted to automate but really couldn't. Now, I think with MCP and AI, you're going to be able to fill in those gaps and have the glue, the connectivity between different major systems, as well as the custom pieces of functionality you need between them. And that's exciting as well. So I think my whole long point about this is that which we once considered to be a weakness no longer needs to be that. And I think that's exciting too.
Mm. All right, Amith, you have a knack of looking ahead, of hitting the nail on the head in terms of what's coming with innovation, with technology, and you've done that quite a bit on the podcast. If you could go back to your episode 1 self, what do you think that version of you would be most surprised about for your episode 100, Amith, like in terms of what's changed?
I think I'd be most surprised with quite happily is the speed at which associations have been actually going out there and experimenting and adopting AI. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that I'm satisfied with it because I'm never satisfied. I always want to push things harder and faster and all that. But the number of associations that are out there that are actually doing things with AI is a much higher percentage than what I would have guessed 2 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean that associations should say, yep, check that box. Let's move on to the next topic. They should keep going really hard. But I'm quite proud of this market for moving and experimenting. It goes against the grain of the culture of this space in terms of moving rapidly and having a willingness to experiment. I think that's generally an important cultural shift for not just for AI, but just it's really good to be of that mindset, I think. But I'm really proud of this market for moving along. And, we've obviously played some role in that, and I'm proud of that as well. But from a technology perspective, I would say to you, out of all the things that I would be surprised by is how extremely powerful tiny little small models are.
Mhm.
Even though we saw the trend line, even before we started recording the pod, it was very clear what was happening in terms of the doubling side, in terms of model capability, and the halving that came with that in terms of cost. We started reporting on this very early that smaller models were increasingly as capable as, last year's frontier model and on and on. And that kept happening. But even though I knew the math worked, just seeing what you can do on a phone or on a PC now with a local model, I do this all the time, running local models on my MacBook. And I haven't done this on a phone, but I know you can run some models on your phone, and they're as good as GPT 3.5, the original model that shipped with ChatGPT. In fact, a lot of the models that I run on my MacBook Pro are better than GPT 4 Turbo, which was at the time we launched the pod, the state of the art, model that cost OpenAI hundreds of millions of dollars to train. That's remarkable that happened in such a short period of time. So I don't think I would have predicted that speed, even though directionally I knew that was happening. I might have said something like, oh, we'll have a GPT-4 turbo equivalent model that can run on a PC by the end of the decade or something like that. But we're already there. So
Wow.
that's amazing.
So speed is even surprising you, Amith, from 2 years ago. That's shocking.
Yeah. I mean, our species, which most of the time I'm generally included within, is is essentially a linear species,
Yeah.
right? We think in those terms. We're not good at thinking exponential. We're looking for our next meal, not our next 1,000 meals, So I think that's a hard thing to go against, millions of years of evolution. And so we are not trained to think in terms of exponentials, and it's very difficult to constantly recalibrate our brains and say, well, no. We can't think about the trend line we've experienced. We've got to think a new order of magnitude every single time there's a doubling.
At Sidecar, we know the power of bringing the brightest, most innovative minds out there together in person to learn and grow. And that's exactly what we do at our annual conference, digitalNow. digitalNow is a 2.5-day conference bringing Silicon Valley and executive-level content to the association space. We bring in expert speakers from places like Google, Amazon, and the U.S. Department of State to share insights on emerging technologies and how they're reshaping the future of associations. Whether you come solo or bring your team to collaborate and implement together, you'll leave with a clear vision for what's next. Join us November 2nd through 5th, 2025 at the Lowe's Hotel in Chicago. To secure your spot, visit digitalnow.sidecar.ai.
Want to lead your team into the AI future? Sidecar's AI Learning Hub for Teams equips your association with practical, on-demand AI education. From self-paced courses to live office hours, your whole team gets the skills to use AI without the jargon. Empower your team. Build AI confidence together. Visit sidecar.ai/LH4T to get started.
I want to move ahead to what Claude helped me call the wisdom harvest. So we're going to look at kind of the wisdom, the insights that we can pull out of our past 99 episodes. Amith, I don't know if you've gotten to this part of our outline yet, but can you guess what the first insight is? The thing we say the most on the podcast might be?
I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm guessing that it's just something like the first thing you should do is learn. Get off your beds and go and learn something. Pretty much just like that. Is that what Claude picked up on?
Almost nailed it. Get educated. Training is critical. I don't think that was an exact quote either. So you probably did deliver it as you, Amith, would have. But that is the first insight. You can't govern what you don't understand. I feel like we go over that all the time, and it's very reaffirming to know that Claude has gotten the same sense from 99 episodes. The second insight is what we just talked about. The pace of change is only accelerating. What feels fast now will feel slow next year, maybe in 6 months. Number 3, you have to experiment. Start small, test, scale. Bullets, then cannonballs. That only makes sense to some of you who listened to that episode of Meet. Can you give us a quick recap of bullets and cannonballs?
Sure. It's one of my favorite metaphors in business, and it comes from Jim Collins, one of my favorite business authors. He had a book called Great by Choice, which covered a number of interesting lessons. But there's a particular chapter in there, I forget the chapter number, where he essentially covers this concept. And the visual metaphor is to paint in your mind the idea of being out at sea in a foggy, dark environment, so you cannot see in front of you or behind you, but you know you have an enemy ship out there, and you have essentially a limited amount. You have a scarce resource, which is gunpowder. You've got a lot of bullets, and you have one cannonball, and you have enough. You have enough gunpowder essentially to fire one cannonball and quite a few bullets. And so the idea is that if you don't know, there's one enemy ship out there. Somehow you know this, but you don't know directionally where it is. So what are you going to do? Well, hopefully you're not going to just load up a cannonball and say, hopefully we're going to get this right. That may not, it's a strategy. It may not be a successful one. Instead, what a lot of people would choose to do is to say, okay, well, let's test this out. Let's just see, let's kind of divide the space we think that the ship might be in and fire a bullet and listen, because we can't see. So we're going to listen for a little ping. And we didn't hear anything. Let's fire another bullet, maybe in another, slightly different direction. Keep adjusting, keep calibrating the direction you're pointing. And then you hear ping. You hear, oh, wait, I actually think I hit my mark. And at that point, though, this is the key lesson. You have to do something. You have to say, okay, well, that other ship isn't hanging out saying, oh, someone just tipped my hull with a bullet. I'm just going to kick back and chill right here. It's just, let's listen to some Jimmy Buffett and have a margarita. Not really likely. They're probably going to keep moving, right? So you might want to immediately load that cannonball and fire away. That's when you got to use your scarce resource and go for it. And so what Collins talks about with his, he has this amazing peer data set where he reviews all the work that is deeply researched, and it's based on this, peer matching concept of companies that had similar circumstances but chose differently. And what he talks about is that there's a lot of companies that do indeed experiment. They do run lots of experiments. They do fire lots of these little bullets. But what they fail to do consistently is to load the cannonball when they have clear, compelling data, not necessarily incontrovertible, not necessarily perfect data, but clear data that suggests strongly that they're on the right track. That's where they fail to fire the cannonball, and therefore they don't win. And so many companies have actually run these experiments, and they found the graphical user interface at Xerox PARC, or they found the digital camera at Kodak, and on and on and on. The stories are out there of people discovering ideas, and these are just innovation ideas, but lots of things like that you find, but then you're like, oh, there's all these reasons why I can't fire the cannonball. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to lose my job. What if it's not actually the right thing that I'm going to hit, if it's something else, and on and on and on. There's always 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't do something. So in that context, we need to really step back and say to ourselves, it's not just experimentation. It's the willingness to take action and go big once a small experiment actually works. That's the essence of the bullets and cannonballs concept.
Yep. So if you're not experimenting, start. And if you are experimenting, you don't just want to have a graveyard of experiments. You want to find the ones that work and then take action. Shoot your cannonball.
And what's cool about that metaphor is you understand immediately what you're talking about. It's in that situation, it's a life and death scenario. You either, do what you need to do, or you're not going to be around for very long to figure it out. You have one shot, literally. And here you kind of have the same thing going on, even if you don't realize it. You don't have a lot of opportunities here. All of us, all of our business models are going to need to change. And experimentation by itself is a great starting point, but you have to be willing to go after the opportunity when you find something that works. For example, a lot of people are finding success with knowledge assistance. This concept of loading your associations knowledge into a knowledge base and then putting it out there and seeing great results. And you're seeing, oh my gosh, people are coming to the knowledge assistant and spending 7, 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time per session instead of the typical website visit, which is under a minute. And so what's going on? There's something happening here that's deeply rewarding to the consumer of that experience. It's not just the association that's excited. Well, what do? You're like, okay, cool, I'm done. Check that box. We're done. Let's move on to the next thing. No, you say, how the hell can I exploit that to its absolute greatest potential? How can I take that knowledge assistant and embed it into every corner of the universe in my industry and make it the de facto standard that people are begging for, right? How do you go absolutely massive, take a giant swing at that particular opportunity? And some associations are taking that step. Others are just like, hey, this is a really cool AI experiment. It's really successful. Certainly from our perspective, that's great as a starting point. But take that big swing if you see something that's right, right in front of you.
Mm. I'm thinking of Ascend 3 again, just because that's what I'm working on currently, but we have several case studies that are incredible in this edition. And I'm thinking of Ascend 4 already and wondering if maybe in that version we'll see some more associations taking those big cannonball moments. To be determined. All right, number 4, and it's funny because Amith, you kind of just said this. Our 4th most mentioned insight is this is not optional. AI readiness isn't a nice to have, it is survival. 5th insight, member expectations have permanently changed. They're expecting Netflix level personalization. 6th insight, personalization at scale is finally possible. One-to-one engagement is achievable. 7th insight, AI won't replace you, but someone using AI will. It's about augmentation, not replacement. 8th insight, your unstructured data is gold, PDFs, content recordings, that's where the value lives. Our 9th insight, move from theory to practice. Stop talking about AI and start doing AI. And then number 10, Claude, Amith, I'll let you know, Claude said this should be your saying. Exponential everything. It's not just AI, it's every technology accelerating. So you must say that a lot as well. Of these 10 insights, Amith, which I think are pretty spot on, which of these have you seen associations being most willing to accept? And which of these do you think you see the most resistance on?
Getting educated, I think people are, it might actually be the answer to both of your questions. People are naturally willing to accept that makes sense, because if you don't understand something to really do it, you have to understand it. Somebody else can't really understand it for you on your behalf and go do it for you. So conceptually, that seems to make sense to everyone. Also, associations are in the education business. So educating seems to be something that they're willing to do for themselves. I'd say that the other side of that, though, is actually getting people to comply with doing the work. Sometimes is a bit of a challenge, where you might have an association leader say, hey, we're going to go and sign up for the Sidecar AI Learning Hub or whatever they're doing, and then not mandate it, to make it optional, to make it more of a carrot rather than a stick type of thing. I don't think it's a carrot or stick thing. I'd say have one in each hand and go for it in both ways, in the sense that you should certainly reward people who are early adopters for learning, but you should also let people know who aren't doing AI training that if they would like to continue being employed by your association, they will be AI educated. They have to be. There's no choice. I've seen more and more association leaders step up and do exactly that. It tends to go a little bit against the grain at a lot of associations, with their culture is a little more collaborative, less like that. But I think that's really important. So that's the part that I think has been a little bit slower than I would have liked. Again, going back to my earlier point about what I've been most surprised with over the last 100 episodes, is there has been a lot of adoption, and a big part of that is the leading edge of it has been learning first. And there's a lot of truly knowledgeable people in the association market at a very deep level on AI, and that's exciting. And that comes from the investment they've made, not really going after it and spending 100 hours in a row typically. I mean, some people may have done that, but typically chipping away at it and just spending a little bit of time every day, every week, and getting better and better and better. And we're seeing that all the time. So to me, it's both sides of that coin, that people get it, but then it's actually getting people to do the work. So beyond the people who are naturally motivated, who carve out the time, who are curious about it, getting everyone on board, what I tell leaders is that they have a leadership imperative to force, not just suggest, but force all of their employees and probably most of their volunteers, the close-in volunteers anyway, to become AI proficient. And the reason it's an imperative isn't because it's what's serving the organization, although it certainly does that. It's to serve the people. Because as a leader, your number one goal is to grow your people. Your product is the rate of growth of your team. And if you grow your team, you will have unbelievable success in your business, whatever that business is, for-profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. If you don't grow your team, you're not leading. You're essentially letting your people go stale. And in this environment, that is malpractice. And we say that very strongly. It's upset some people when I've said that, but I really don't care. It is leadership malpractice to not demand that your entire team learn AI and learn it now. So that's probably the area that I get frustrated most when I see a little bit too much of a laissez-faire kind of a mindset about the speed at which people should learn this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to that bullets and cannonball metaphor, I don't think the captain of that ship is kind of like, everyone, can we all agree? Do we want to shoot this one bullet here? I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe there's different kinds of ships out there, but speaking of the imperative to grow your people and educate your team on AI, if you're listening still to the episode right now, we want to let you know about a giveaway we're doing in honor of 100 episodes of the Sidecar Sync. If you've been enjoying listening to our episodes and you would like to go to LinkedIn, make a post about one of your top favorite episodes of the Sidecar Sync podcast, tag Sidecar, Amith, and me, we will be selecting one individual to gift 1 year of the AI Learning Hub to. I know a lot of you are already in the AI Learning Hub, so you can also, if you're selected, gift that to someone else on your team. So this is kind of a little Easter egg. We wanted to mention it now for all of our super fans who are still tuned in. So please make your posts on LinkedIn and may the best post win. Okay, moving to our next section in the Wisdom Harvest, which is if we could only tell associations one thing, and we divided this out into CEOs, IT leaders, membership teams, education and content teams, and boards. For CEOs, executive directors, your role isn't to be the AI expert, it's to ensure your organization and your people have AI expertise. For IT leaders, stop trying to control AI, start enabling it safely. For membership teams, every member interaction without AI augmentation is a missed opportunity. For education and content folks, your content plus AI equals new revenue streams. And for boards, if you're not asking about AI strategy, you're not doing your fiduciary duty. Claude said it, not me. Amith, how have your conversations with leaders changed over the last 2-ish years?
There's some very consistent elements, which I've already mentioned in terms of education, getting started, running experiments, going bigger once you find something that works. That I think will be consistent in the next 2 years. What I think has changed in the last couple of years in conversation is the amount of choice that's out there has really grown tremendously. So choice in terms of AI models, providers where you can run the models, what's called inference, which we talk about a fair bit. There are many options out there. And a lot of the associations that are out there doing stuff just kind of default to using OpenAI, some using Claude or Gemini, but mostly OpenAI, which OpenAI is definitely the leader in the market in terms of market share, and arguably, depending on who you talk to, in terms of model capability. But there are so many different choices to be had that are out there in terms of providers, models, things you can run, literally hundreds of different models you can run on dozens of different legitimate providers, some of which offer fast inference, much, much faster than what OpenAI or Azure, anybody like that offers. And so I think it's important to think a little bit more deeply about this and don't just go down, kind of robotically to OpenAI path. Again, if you think that OpenAI is great, by all means use them, but consider your alternatives. And that wasn't a thing 2 years ago. There were other choices 2 years ago, but not nearly the depth of opportunity that there is now. So that makes it really exciting. A lot of people also assume that cost is going to be a major hurdle for them because the cost of some of the major providers, in particular like Anthropic's Claude, is extremely expensive to use. So if you're like, oh, well, if I use the API for Claude's Opus 4.1 to process all my content, it's going to cost me $800,000 or something like that. And that may be true, but you also might be able to process your content and do the things you're looking to do with a model that's a tenth the size or even smaller and runs for a hundredth or a thousandth the cost on, using open source on a variety of inference platforms. So that choice didn't exist 2 years ago at the level it does now. And that requires a little bit more critical thinking.
All right, we're moving toward the end of the episode, Amith. I want to ask some, I guess we can do it kind of rapid fire questions, but some of these are worth a discussion as well. If there was one use case from the past 99 episodes that we have discussed that you could snap your fingers right now and all associations would have it implemented immediately, what would the one use case be? You have to pick one thing.
That's really tough. As you know, I have a hard time picking one thing and I have a hard time saying anything quickly, but I will do my best. I would say that the one thing that I would like to see associations snap their fingers and do is implement personalization because it's easy and it works and it's inexpensive and you can get it done so fast. It's low risk. And frankly, if you don't do it, you're going to seem pretty dinosaur-like pretty soon, if not already. And the value is enormous. I mean, if you personalize your content, your members are starting to get what they actually want. It's just an opportunity that's just so incredibly obvious to me. So I think that's out of all the things I wish people could all do, that's universally important. There are others out there we talk about here, but that would be the one that my brain goes to right away. Of course, it's the category of AI that I've been working with the longest for over a decade. I've been deep into personalization weeds, but through that experience, I know how hard it used to be and how expensive it used to be and how many millions of dollars you used to have to throw at these personalization engines just to get them running. And now how quickly you can get a wide array of personalization technologies going very, very inexpensively and incredibly effectively. If you're not doing it, you're really missing out. That would be my point.
That was a pretty quick answer. And you said one thing. I'm impressed. Which guest?
It kind of hurt to have to limit it, but I'm going to stop right
That's
there.
why I wrote it that way. Which guest changed how you think about AI, or perhaps maybe one of your favorite guests? I know we've had a lot on the podcast and I didn't prep you for this. So if you can think of one right now, who would you say?
Yeah, I'd probably point to our conversation with Ian Andrews of Grok. He's the chief revenue officer of Grok, longtime colleague and friend of mine. I've known Ian for decades now, and really smart guy, really insightful revenue leader across a variety of companies over the course of decades in his career. And, the way he described the demand for inference at Grok, and for those of you who heard us talk about Grok, we're referring to Grok with a Q. GROQ, Cloud.com. These guys are one of several fast inference providers. So their platform is proprietary hardware that literally delivers about a 10x improvement in speed compared to OpenAI and Claude and Gemini running open source models. And I'd say the insight that I took from our conversation with him was that because he's talking to some of the largest investors and corporations in the world about their platform. And the kind of consumption and growth and demand they're seeing in inference, it's just kind of impossible to put your brain around it. Even for those guys, in that space, the speed at which demand is growing is unbelievable. So to me, that moment in time was interesting, just in conversations with them outside of the pod leading up to that. And since then, it's just reinforced it. But the demand for this stuff is just absolutely incredible. And you don't really see that in the association market as directly. So talking to someone who's immersed in that world was fascinating for me.
That's a great answer. What do you think we'll be talking about in episode 200 that sounds like sci-fi today?
I think in the next 100 episodes, which should be roughly 2 years, right? Right around digitalNow 2027. It's completely nuts. What will the world look like? We will have real-time video avatar interaction that's trained against our knowledge bases and our content, capable of doing some pretty incredible stuff. So think about like live real time perfect caliber like tutoring against all of your knowledge, professional assistants that are there with you. And the video side of it might sound gimmicky to some people, but the degree of, kind of the dimensionality that gives you, the interactive nature, not only you see the avatar, but the avatar sees you and understands you better, because we communicate so much of what we have to say and how we're feeling through our expression, through our hand gestures, all that. So I think that part of what we're dealing with is going to just absolutely blow up. We've talked about world models a little bit recently. You had Thomas Altman on, and you guys talked about that. We've talked about world models in prior episodes before that. That's going to give AI a new level of kind of understanding of the world, right? Physical understanding of the world, coupled with increasing levels of knowledge. There's going to be some kind of a breakthrough in fundamental model architecture that really changes the game. Some of the limitations we have in the current architectures we work with are, they're being overcome bit by bit, piece by piece on a regular basis through advancements. But the fundamental architecture for transformers that I'm speaking of is still the fundamental architecture that's now, almost 10 years old. 100 episodes from now, Transformers will be exactly 10 years old. I believe we'll have some significant breakthroughs by then that will change things like, context windows won't even be a conversation potentially. We'll just be effectively in the world of infinite context windows with extraordinary instruction following with long context. And I think that's going to be a really big thing. And I guess the last thing I'd say, since you didn't say I had to pick one, I'm going on
next
and
time
on
on the 200th,
Yeah.
I'll be more specific. Yep.
Yeah, you got to remember that with me. But the last thing I would say, I think in 100 episodes from now, we will have hundreds of AI agents deployed by hundreds of associations doing really, really rich, meaningful work. Because we're at that tipping point right now for agentic AI. AI is being used by most organizations at some level, but it's primarily what I'd call consumer grade use cases. What I mean by that is not derogatory at all. It's simply that it's an individual user doing work with Claude or with an assistant, asking one question at a time, doing one step at a time. And agentic AI is simply the ability to stitch that together. The glue in the middle is sometimes AI reasoning. Sometimes it's good old classical workflows like step A, then step B, then step C, what you could model out on a whiteboard with a good old fashioned flowchart, right? And so that's becoming more and more and more accessible. And so we're going to be spending tons of time talking about agents, probably even more than we have in the last 100 episodes. And I think there will be hundreds of associations that have deployed many hundreds of agents, maybe thousands of agents in the next 100 episodes. So I'm really pumped about that, because the value from that is going to make the value we received thus far from AI seem pretty minuscule.
And I think it's very likely that the association leaders listening to this podcast will be part of that group that has implemented hundreds of agents. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to our 100th episode of the Sidecar Sync. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It has been a beautiful ride over the past 2-ish years. We so appreciate you tuning in. We love having these conversations and learning new things alongside with you all. So everybody, we'll see you all for episode 101.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sidecar Sync podcast. If you want to dive deeper into anything mentioned in this episode, please check out the links in our show notes. And if you're looking for more in-depth AI education for you, your entire team, or your members, head to sidecar.ai.